Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're going to do a follow-up to a video I did yesterday talking about pop culture websites. Now, I was talking more about when we had a lot of activists kind of come into the geek news scene, and we did a little digging. Geeky mostly did digging, and we're going to talk about who owns what. And basically, it boils down to a handful of sites. We're talking like under 10 companies own most of the pop culture websites. So when it seems like all of these news outlets are in lockstep, they probably are, because they're effectively the same website, just different brands of the same site.
Right, they're probably in the same Slack channels. I mean, they're different sites, but they probably, talk or, hey, we need you to push this right now. That's why the narrative's always on lineup.
Yeah, and it is the narrative. And of course, when you've got, big ad spends from studios or video game developers or whatever, and they tell you, hey, these YouTubers are doing some damage to our brand, you better paint them as being, bad people if you want our ad money. They're probably going to do it. And in some cases, these websites are actually partially owned by some of the studios like Disney and Warner Brothers. So we're gonna go down the rabbit hole. Geeky did some more research this morning, and we did a video like this, I think a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I had researched it before.
Yeah, talking about who owns what, but it's actually gotten worse. Since the pandemic, a lot of these media outlets have consolidated even more. So you're gonna find out that all of your pop culture news, your geek news, is all coming from a handful of sources, and it's all the illusion of choice. So before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants here on Clownfish TV. Over 275,000 subs. Check out clownshishtv.com. We're trying to build up that site to be an alternative, and also piratesandprincesses.net, which is objective Disney theme park news. And look, this is really interesting because this does in part explain why so many of these sites black out certain people or shill for certain movies or video games.
Always have the same opinion at the same time. And then it looks like, to somebody who doesn't know any better, that might be the proper opinion because they're all saying the same thing at the same time. They're all agreeing.
When you've got 20 different media outlets all saying the same thing, all saying, hey, this movie's great, these fans are bad, whatever, you start to realize that it's like, no, that's not actually the case. It might actually only be 5 or 6 media companies, some of them which have a vested interest or, with these studios, but they're using all of their different channels to blast the same message. So it looks like, it's almost like they've got sock puppet accounts. It looks like they are, drowning you out, that you must be crazy. You have to be crazy because, oh my God, all these sites, Screen Rant, Collider, Comic Book Resources, MovieWeb, Game Rant, The Gamer, and DualShockers all said, this movie's great, this game is great, you're a Nazi if you don't like it, whatever. And it turns out that they're all owned by the exact same company. So when these studios do an ad buy, or these companies do an ad buy, they're gonna buy across the network. And a lot of these companies are actually ad agencies first.
Yeah, well, especially if you're ValNet connected, which,
Yeah, these are ValNet. So just to reiterate, and I talked about this yesterday, how sad it was that at one point in time, Comic Book Resources and Screen Rant and Game Rant were independently owned. I think Game Rant and Screen Rant they bought just a couple of years ago. Comic Book Resources they bought back in 2016. Collider's not independent anymore. And Collider's the one where the one dude, I think it was Christian Harloff, he rage quit because Disney didn't want him to go to Galaxy's Edge. Disney wanted Collider to send women because that was their mandate. Like, we want wine moms to come to Galaxy's Edge, and he got pissed, and I think he walked away. I'm not sure what happened, but yeah, none of these sites are independent. They're all owned by the same company. And it's kind of funny, if you go out to this one here, I just thought it was interesting. This is Red Ventures. They bought a bunch of the video game sites off of CBS, and we're gonna talk more about that. But the very first thing you see on their website, we help people discover and decide. We push the narrative. We help people discover and decide. So look, media's always been kind of dubious, has always been kind of biased, going hundreds of years ago, newspapers, all of that. But in digital media, especially because, again, the venture capital's running out, the ad rates are kind of drying up, and all these companies are consolidating, it's even more obvious than it was in old media TV networks and stuff like that. So let's go down the rabbit hole here. We already talked about Valnet. And again, like Geeky said, these people, I guarantee you, they're all in Slack channels together.
We've said that repeatedly. That's why you see these authors all working for the same sites because, or for different sites because they're in the same network, or like they leave one and go to another, and you're like, oh, they left CBR and they're in Collider now, or vice versa. Yeah, because they're all owned by the same place. They're just shifting.
It's all the same damn website, basically. It's just different flavors of the same website. So let's talk about some of these here. This is Penske Media.
Yeah, now this is the big one.
This is the big one.
So Penske Media had taken over MRC, which was Valance, at one point. Now they became PMRC. Now, here's what's interesting. They own Variety, but they also now own the Hollywood Reporter. They control the Hollywood Reporter as well, which were always, like
competitors.
They're both owned by the same place.
Deadline, Variety, yes.
Yes. Rolling Stone, IndieWire, Billboard, Vibe, Deadline. Those are all under this Penske Media.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's one of the groups. So we have the Valnet and Penske. So we have two now. Okay.
Well, and also about Penske, they also own, because they have Rolling Stone, they also run South by Southwest.
Oh, yes.
Which is, and they run different events and stuff like that. So again, it's the illusion of choice. You think, well, the Hollywood Reporter and Deadline and Variety might all have different opinions. It's like, no, they're all owned by the same company.
Well, they're supposed to be independently operated, but
no,
technically some of our stuff is independently operated, but it's all owned by
Technically, I mean, this is again, it's more obvious now than it was even 5 or 6 years ago because in the case of like Valnet, there's been a lot of consolidation since 2016, 2018. Penske, especially, if you look at the Wikipedia page for it, you can see like all the stuff they've acquired just in the last couple of years. And I think that's because of the pandemic and the ad revenue drying up and the venture capital drying up, that all these companies are consolidating.
Okay, so we have those ones. Okay, you want to talk about gamers next?
Yeah. We can talk about
gamers is the third one, the Gamers Group, and they own the Prima Games stuff.
Yeah.
They also do a lot of stuff with esports, but they also own the Mary Sue.
Okay, so let's talk about this. This is interesting because I just mentioned yesterday that we were talking about the Mary Sue and how it seems like they've kind of pivoted in the last couple months.
They're not doing as much political shit, and they're trying to be more, just like even their titles, and I don't read the articles, but in the headlines, they're not like trying to alienate fans as much as they were trying to. They still have their triggering articles, mostly like Rachel Chick, but they are doing better about that.
Yeah, so we thought, well, maybe they've seen the light. No, they got sold off at the end of last year. The Mary Sue got sold off at the end of last year. And they said they're still technically independent, but they were started by Abrams Media. And I guess his other thing, Abrams, was he had a couple of political sites, which explains why the Mary Sue was
so political.
But again,
that and the writers that are on it explains quite a bit.
This date, though, is important. I want to point this out because we were trying to figure out like when exactly all of this weirdness and pop culture media started. 2011, 2012 I'm going back and looking at some of these companies and when they were first started getting rounds of venture capital, when some of these companies actually started, and it was around between 2010 and 2012, there were incentives to start blogs like this, media outlets like this. And again, there were rounds of venture capital. As soon as the venture capital ran out, you can see that a lot of these sites got consolidated, got sold off. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing this happen more and more, especially with BuzzFeed failing, Vox is failing, Vice is failing. All these companies that kind of popped up around the same time, all these digital media outlets are all failing and consolidating. But again, the point of this being, all these attacks are only coming from a handful of places. For all this talk of, you've got these wild conspiracy theories about how like the far right is masterminding YouTubers and all this crazy shit. That's hard to prove, but this is actually very easy to prove that all of these media outlets are owned by a handful of people.
They're pushing certain agendas.
Yes.
So also Gamers Group owns We Got This Covered and the Daily Dot.
Okay, they don't even have that. I don't even think they have that on their website.
It was on Wikipedia.
Okay, so I don't think they've updated their website. They were mostly gaming sites, but like the Mary Sue's not on here either, but if you actually go into the fine print. So yeah, they own We Got This Covered, which is, a lot more clickbaity than we are.
Yeah.
and the Daily Dot, which
Yeah,
is...
we know they don't like us though because we got this covered once and tried to credit our site belonged to somebody else they really didn't like.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny to me because they own Mary Sue too, and we always are calling them Mary Sue, so it explains why they're so pissy towards us. Then you have so we're up to like there's 3 there.
Yeah.
Okay, so another one is Vox Media. Vox Media has you have a list right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this one, we've actually talked about Vox and Vice and those companies at length. We weren't really paying attention to the other ones that were quietly going around and gobbling up all these other blogs.
Right. Well, actually, Vice bought up the controlling media with Group 9 Media, which I want to point out is 25% owned by Warner Brothers Discovery.
Yes.
So the Group 9 Media things like Thrillist, Now This, Dodo, Seeker, Pop Sugar, those came in recently, but they already had owned Verge, Vulture, Polygon, and Vox before that.
We've seen a lot of these outlets, again, in lockstep, especially with anti-gamer articles, like Vulture and Polygon and Vox will all be kind of in lockstep, and then they start referencing each other, linking to each other.
Yeah, they'll do that a lot. You'll notice if you look at these articles, their sources is another one of the same blogs, media sites in the same network.
And they're all probably hosted on the same server. A lot of them share editorial. We know, and we're going to talk about Geo Media more, that they've actually consolidated most of their websites under one top level URL because it wasn't even worth the trouble of, having a top level URL because you can sell ads easier on one big site versus, a bunch of little ones. But yeah, I mean, you really start digging into this and you can see why it seems like there are so many of quote unquote them against so many of quote unquote us, and why they work so hard to try to help deplatform YouTubers because YouTube is mostly democratic. It's like you can be a rando in the corner of your house, corner of your bedroom, in your basement, getting more views than these corporate-backed YouTube channels.
And it benefits them to sit there and scream about, there's this conspiracy, because they themselves are trying to hide the fact that they're all connected, preaching the mandate when it comes down, whatever their advertiser is, whatever they're trying to promote that week, whatever, idea they all share in the Slack channel, they all run with at the same time. That's why you see all these articles, boom, 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 from these same people, all in lockstep.
Yeah, and you'll see like if Vox is hurting, you'll see articles about Vox hurting. All of a sudden, all these other outlets will start laying people off. That's like Polygon laid off that dude that was did the PS5 article. Was it Ian Walker? And he was lamenting about it. But it's like, because basically it's all Vox. It's just different flavors of Vox. It's all the same.
Another one, we're going to say about Paramount Group. Paramount Group, who, owns CBS, Nickelodeon, MTV, VH1, Simon & Schuster, Showtime. They also own comicbook.com, popculture.com. We've talked about this before, because back when they were doing different things that was CBS, you'd see all these articles pop up on these outlets because they were owned by the parent company that wanted it run. Oh, you said they also have GameSpot?
Yeah, okay, so they sold a bunch of sites off. This is what's interesting. CBS came in, and when it was hot to buy up these video game websites, and a lot of these have been around for a while, like Giant Bomb and GameSpot and GameFAQs. They sold a bunch of them off to...
Who did they sell them to?
This group.
Oh, so you're going to bring this one up. I didn't have
this is Red Ventures, and they bought Giant Bomb.
The ones that help you discover and decide what they have GameSpot, the GameSpot and stuff?
Yep.
They're going to help you decide. But if you went and looked at their articles, they're probably like very one-sided.
Advice at scale.
Well, you have to understand, too, on the other page when you had the other page about them, they have a whole tag for diversity.
Yes, they do.
So wonder why they're promoting certain things, guys. I wonder why.
Yes, that is actually, and that could have something to do with venture capital. There's a lot of talk about this ESG stuff. I don't know, but that is obviously...
There's clearly a bent to this.
There is
They own TechCrunch, too?
They own, here's what they own. They own, let's see here, Points Guys, our brand. Hold on, let's view all the brands. They own a lot of stuff, and a lot of them aren't even on the site. GameSpot, CNET, Bankrate. Let's see what else they have. TechCrunch, I think, is one of them. You said?
I thought it said. Maybe not. That's what it said above.
TV Guide now, they own the website.
I saw about TV Guide.
ZDNet, which was Ziff Davis, which was the company that owned Electronic Gaming Monthly. I think that has actually reverted back to the owner of Electronic Gaming Monthly, because I'm stalking that one because I want Electronic Gaming Monthly someday. But they're just brands. It's all a different flavor of...
Metacritic.
They own Metacritic too?
Right there.
Oh my God, yeah, they do. Good catch. I didn't even see that one. Holy shit. Now the rabbit hole goes really deep.
Trusted website, but they're going to wait. A trusted website that helps people make informed decisions. That goes along with what they said, that they're going to tell you how to just determine, decide, whatever it was they said.
Yeah, their homepage.
Yeah,
We help
discover
people
and decide.
Discover and decide.
I think it was a D word of some kind.
Discover and decide. Discover
Another D word
and decide and diversity. And if you go back here, they own Metacritic. They own GameStop. Again, these are review sites. They own them. And if you go to their advertising page, you're basically like, we're going to tell your audience what to buy. And
based on how much money you give us.
Based on how much money you give us.
And they aren't saying that, but that's the implication.
That's the implication. So I'm just saying, like, all of these websites, and we only have, how many sources do we have so far?
So we had 6, and there's one more, and that's GeoMedia.
Which is doing very bad right now, actually. I don't even think I have a page pulled up.
So this would be 7 total.
GeoMedia.
But GeoMedia, GeoMedia, they have like AV Club, Deadspin, Gizmodo, Jezebel, Kotaku, The Onion, Lifehacker, The Root, etc., etc.
And they've actually, they were for sale. They were Gawker, basically what was left of Gawker, went to GeoMedia. They had a hard time, as Univision, I think, owned them. They had a hard time finding a buyer, and they're the ones that have had problems with their writers because they wanted to unionize. Now they have a union, but then it's kind of an FU to them. They moved everybody out of like Chicago to LA. And what's going to happen is, all of these outlets are going to whittle down to only a handful of websites. Mm-hmm. But what's really dubious about the whole thing is, like, especially when it comes to movie reviews and stuff like that, it looks like, oh my God, 20 or 30 sites are all saying this is the best thing ever. And you need to go, when in reality, it might only be 2 companies owning all those websites.
We didn't even go further back than that. You probably track it back to people that are tied to studios and stuff that have partial ownership or investors in the company. I was going to say Vice, for example. You said Disney wrote this off. Yes and no. Yes and no. Yeah. They wrote that off. The $400 million was it that they did. However, when they got the Fox assets and they acquired some other things like A&E and stuff like that, they are part ownership of that. Those things, there was Vice stock that came with it, Vice stake that came with that too.
Okay.
So they still technically own it. It was tied in with other acquisitions they made after this date.
So here's the thing, and this is one thing that I learned. I worked in newspapers for years, and one of the papers I worked for was actually privately owned. But the thing is that since it was privately owned, that owner had other businesses, and we would have to write human interest stories about these other businesses. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the editorial mandate. So, I mean, look, and that's why a lot of journalists, they have to disclose. Now, there are laws out there you have to disclose. We were given a review copy. We get
an
affiliate link. We're owned by whatever company. Comicbook.com, if they cover Star Trek, they'll say we're owned by CBS, we're owned by Paramount, just to cover their ass. Like, yeah, we're going to talk about Star Trek.
But it's like in the fine print most often. So.
Fine print. Most people are never going to see it. And you really have to dig to see who owns what. But yeah, guys, basically all of your pop culture news is coming from less than 10 sources.
It's like 7 or 8.
7 or 8 sources. And it continues to consolidate. Again, we totally missed the Mary Sue thing. They got sold the end of last year, which explains so much, because we're sitting here like, why are they kind of walking back some of their political hot takes and trying to do news just about pop culture? And the reality is they're doing it because...
Oh, they still have their political hot takes, but it's
not as bad as it was.
It doesn't seem to be as bad. Well, they probably got a mandate. You better start getting some damn views. That would explain a lot of the clickbait ramp-ups.
Yeah, and Comic Book Resources, that's kind of what kicked this whole thing off, because Comic Book Resources, I don't think they have anybody really in charge over there. I think it's basically just... to Valnet, since they're basically an advertising company, it's whatever brings clicks.
Right, because that's what they were. They were like doing advertising and like, setting up, that you could go through them to get packages for your websites and stuff for advertising. And now they're just owning the sites and then running these as part of their ad network. It's going to be a glorious buy to someone like Disney or Warner Bros. Discovery or one of these big studios, because, any of these big companies, because you can get your stuff seen on all these blogs. And that's great, but that also explains why all the blogs are done in lockstep.
Yep, and we saw this with Universal, with She-Ra, because they own, Universal is NBC Universal, they own Sci-Fi, and there were other websites that were, I think, part of the Vox network, because they had invested in Vox, and those were the websites that were all like, She-Ra She-Ra's getting hate. The new She-Ra's getting hate by all these men that just want to jerk off to She-Ra. And it's because all the websites that were going with that narrative were owned or bankrolled by Universal.
Which makes the most sense. That some of these shows or movies people that generally overwhelmingly don't like are actually maybe because they're just not good, or that it's all just a bunch of misogynistic alt-right Yahtzees who all are, voting for Trump and who live in their mom's basements because these media outlets say so. Which one makes more sense,
So this is why they hate alternatives. This is why they're going so hard against YouTubers, because a lot of times you look into the YouTube channels, for these websites, and a lot of them have websites like Screen Rant. If it wasn't for Pitch Meeting, Screen Rant would be a nothing burger.
Yeah, pretty much. Which the Pitch Meeting is funny though.
The Mary Sue, their website, their YouTube channel sucks. I think they tried to do like a pop culture show or something.
This all goes back to your unified theory of everything we talked about in the last video. These sites all were having people work for them. A lot of them very cheap, or like weren't paying them at all, as it turned out, until they got bought out by corporate. So these people got in there and then got themselves a nice little cushy seat back before they got bought up, and then they just went with the site. So and then they're all like going across talking to everybody else and swaying everybody else and talking across channels, I'm sure, and then they all walk in lockstep. So where do you think this all came from?
There is a Discord server out there. I've been told by multiple people.
We would have figured that ourselves.
All these people are hanging out, talking to each other from all these different websites, because my enemy of my enemy is my friend. Even if you're working for one company, getting rid of alternative voices, independent websites, YouTubers.
Plus, if you get fired, you can jump ship someplace else.
You can jump ship someplace else. So they're all talking to each other, and the reality is that they are a very, 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 very small percentage that have a very big megaphone that somebody else built, that gave them, and they're freaking out because now, again, you can have just randos out of the corner of their bedroom get more views, and then their owners have to look at them too, because they're being told, we need an expensive set and we need all this whatever to do a show, and they're like, well, here's just some guy, the kids in the background,
here's a couple in their house in a room in their back corner by their bedroom.
Here's a couple working out of their house,
and they're kicking your ass.
And their owners have to be asking them, like, why? Like Nerdist, they have this big fancy set, and I remember they had this interview with Mark Waid on it and stuff, and I'm like, but the video only got a couple thousand views, and they're probably like, what the hell? Look at G4
People
TV.
mocking the video got more views.
Yeah. Look at G4 TV. G4 TV spent how many millions of dollars to build the sets and to hire the people and the whatever, and they were a huge failure. So I think they know that their time is up, that the gig is up, and I don't know. It's really interesting though. So when you have a whole bunch of websites telling you you're wrong, I just realize it's only 5 or 6 websites really, with a bunch of sock puppet sites.
Yeah. Well, there's alternate sites that are all owned by the same people, and it's like 7 or 8, but yes.
Yeah, and there is a corporate interest usually with them. So we're gonna wrap this up.
Yep.
Good work, Geeky. She's very good at finding dirt.
Well, I had this before, but I updated it because you asked me to.
I did, but she does a good job. Can't pull a fast one on Geeky. I know this.
I usually
from
find
personal
out.
experience. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up.
Yes.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.